What's up, everyone? All right, let me get the link shared out on Discord and Twitter, and we will get started. Hey, everyone. All right. Well, looking at a few things today, looking at Bitcoin. I took along yesterday. The idea was to have this low come and get swept. We actually swept this in a really quick wick. The idea of longing on a reclaim here. I am watching for the potential of a retracement to maybe add to longs. But anyways, we got a big wick. I was out, but I took the long from my phone. Also took a long on ETH on this big wick here. There's another idea coming in, sweeping this wick into this trend line. Just longed at the same time. And I have a long on XRP coming and sweeping this wick. Front ran the fib down here. But, I'll go over what my plan is for those. But happy to sit in that position for now. ETH had a very substantial high volume candle here. So a nice potential for a significant pivot. There are some short ideas I'm interested in locally. We'll see if we can impulse up into the New York Open. But let's start with Bitcoin. So the idea I have for Bitcoin is I'd like to take profits on my long up here. And we have this this trend line that could be worth watching. More or less around here. But the idea for me would be coming up and sweeping yesterday's daily candle up into this structure. If we reject there, I am going to look for a tight invalidation short. Validation is gonna depend on how high we push above the level. It could even make sense to run a stop above these highs. And all of my shorts I'm gonna be targeting down into these lows. And ideally, I'll be in a scenario where I can take shorts and I can take longs. I can lock in profits on my longs, stop to entry, take some shorts, and get positioned for the possibility of a break in either direction. If we just break out here, I'm going to look into the highs of the range here, even this high for a potential short. So I'm willing to take this on a rejection with clear invalidation. Otherwise, I'll just look to the highs of the range, carry my long higher. But I do think this level would be a great spot for a swing long, personally. And could definitely call all of these lows significant. You can't really see it, but we have a little wick low right here. Taking these lows, reclaiming them. There's a few different ways to trade it if we did get a big move down like that. One is you could wait for a reclaim of these as a trigger. Try to trade it more aggressively off of this wick here. And for that, I would be willing to try to hold that to 50K. And the basic premise, 48, 50K in this region. The basic premise of this trade is It's a 382 retracement from this low. It's a retest of this previous high. And the idea would be we come in and wipe out all this liquidity that built up in this kind of choppy grinding uptrend, where we left all these consecutive higher lows. Wipe out all that liquidity and then get the move up. So this would be a long I'd be very interested in taking and holding as a swing up into this region of the chart. I would probably still look to take some scalp longs, some lower time frame shorts, head shorts along the way. Not expecting price to necessarily go straight up, but hold this as a separate position. That'll be my swing position. And there might be some ideas of taking shorts, but that doesn't mean I have to close my long. But of course, we just have so many lows here that could offer major reactions. It's kind of tough to trade if you wouldn't be surprised to see reactions off of every single one of these lows on the way down. But we'll see. Maybe you just run all the liquidity at once. But I think this idea is pretty straightforward, a retest. And if we slightly front run it, I'll just be longing on a reclaim as a trigger. So that's the main long setup I'm looking for. Into the New York session, wouldn't be surprised to see us push up through these highs and maybe get that local short setup. We did have some bullish order flow coming in here, but the market structure was quite bearish, just grinding down lower for this impulse to the downside. Now, as you're saying, how do you have a confirmation of a rejection? Thank you. Are you saying, sometimes people use the term rejection. Are you referring to a confirmation of a bounce from here or a confirmation of a rejection up here? Rejection for a short or a bounce at the lows? We can take a look at ETH as well. Okay, I'll answer that question in a second. Similar idea on ETH. We had this kind of ascending trend line. I was looking for this long. I think what could be interesting is, and I'm even going to clear up this chart a little bit. I'd drawn out a little diagram earlier in the Discord. I'm going to get rid of this just to clean it up a bit. So we have this potential trend line here. Come up and take these highs, maybe even take the trend line. We'll see how much strength there is in ETH, but would be interested in taking a head short. I do have targets I'd like to take up here, and so I'm willing to trade some longs, but I'm probably going to be taking profits on my longs on a rejection here and taking a head short. But the key levels on ETH I'd like to trade is I wouldn't be surprised to see, say at the same time that Bitcoin comes and takes out all of its consecutive lows, well, that would look like this on ETH, down to around 17,050. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen at some point, but it might look more like this. Maybe we flip this into resistance. We could come up, we could get something like that. So the key levels I'm looking to trade are here, here, the top of the range, here. And I know it can be confusing when you draw out all the levels at once, but just illustrating, those are the levels I'm probably willing to trade. And even though I would like to see these range highs taken, and I'd like to see these lows taken for maybe higher time frame setups, I'm willing to trade some of this local price action on different time frames if there's a clear trigger. So someone's asking, how do you have confirmation of a rejection? So I'm going to answer this question in a couple ways. The first is, there's no way to confirm a rejection to the point where you can remove your risk. So there's no way to say we've rejected or we've claimed, therefore price has to go down. So a trigger, like let's say we get a really high volume, high delta sweep up here, lots of longs opening, price rejects. Well, there's a trigger for short for me. That does not mean price can't just go like this. But that's the technical setup. You have your invalidation, you have your entry. We've all seen, so like some people will say, I can just show a million examples, and I'm not really putting anyone on blast here. It will sound like I'm disparaging someone. I'm not. There's no right or wrong way. But say for example, you take a short on a fast wick, or you take a long on a fast wick, and there's a really quick reaction. You take the entry, and then say you get stopped out. Well, someone will say that's why you never take a trade on a wick. You always wait for a 4-hour close, or you always wait for a 1-hour close, or you always wait for price to consolidate above the level for 30 minutes, whatever it is. But then sometimes price wicks through the level and it's up 10% or 5% or 4R. You know, let's say your idea was to trade into this POC. I probably would have taken an entry much lower, but again, I was trading from my phone. But I would have taken the entry on this wick. So say you have a high volume, high delta wick, taking that entry aggressively might be the only opportunity you get to get a clean entry. Nothing wrong with waiting for confirmation, but the point is a quick wick through a level and a quick reaction isn't any less valid than waiting for a 4-hour close, right? Like we could get a big impulse on a really quick wick, tons of volume, tons of delta. I could take that trigger and then I could just get stopped out. But I have invalidation. So I just want to be clear that when I'm describing what I view as like confirmation of a trade, it doesn't mean the trade will work. But I think if we kind of put order flow aside, I think everyone can look at volume. Not everybody can look at live order flow. If you have a high volume move up through a level, maybe get some of that volatility, a big wick rejection, and price falls back below the level, that can be used as a trade trigger. You can trade a wick through a level, and that happens all the time. You can wait for a close below and maybe a retest if you get one and try to trade a retest. Both are valid. But if price has ran through the level, and typically you want to see high volume, signs that liquidity has been grabbed, and then it comes back through the level, that's a valid trade trigger, in my view. Like for example, we can see on ETH, we didn't actually run these lows, but when you see this huge volume wick, even without order flow, compare it to every other wick, even this whole uptrend, this is a massive liquidity grab here. And I oftentimes am looking at Bitcoin as well with ETH, where it might be likely for Bitcoin to bounce. But if you see this big reaction, it's just certainly sensible to be looking at longs here on a quick reaction. But you can also wait for a reclaim of levels. This is this level. Looking for price to reclaim it. We rejected from this previous low. We've claimed it. Now we're potentially claiming this previous low, kind of wicking through it a little bit. Same on XRP. If you were looking for a fill or a sweep of this wick, which was the setup I shared, I actually got the short from up here as well, because this was a major level for me on XRP, coming and taking this high into this high time frame fib. And I was actually front run on the level by like 0.2%, but I still had my alert set up there at the time. And when I got this big wick, I just took the short here above with invalidation above the golden pocket. Got a really quick rejection, but my idea for a long was coming and filling this wick. So we filled it, had a really quick reaction. I took the trade on a quick reaction. That's enough confirmation for me. If price comes down and stops me out, well, then I take a stop. It's not the end of the world. But so I've had probably like 20 conversations like this in the Discord where people will ask me how I confirm a setup, a rejection, a sweep of a level, a reclaim of a level. But it oftentimes ends up that they're basically saying, sometimes I take a trade and I get stopped out. How did I know, not to take that trade? Because it looked like price reclaimed a level, but then I got stopped out. There's not really a way to answer that question that stops you from ever getting stopped out. So that's the main point I'm making. You have a technical idea, you have your trade setup planned, price runs the level, you get a rejection, you take the trade, you use risk management. If it doesn't work, you take a stop loss. If it does work, you run it to targets. And ideally, when you see these boxes showing a stop loss, an entry trigger, a target, the risk reward of the setup, like something like this, could run as a 10-to-1. You could try trading it tighter. 8-to-1, you could try trading it wider. But basically you make 8 to 10 times more than you lose if you win the trade. And you might end up taking some more trades in here. For example, we reject here. Maybe you take a scalp long, take some profits. Maybe you try to compound those profits back into adding to your short. So, but that's the general idea. I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade trigger into the New York Open. Might be a little after. Someone's asking, can you teach us order flow? Well, I do teach it in the Discord. I have content on it. I talk about it almost every day. I can't remember if it was on public live streams or not, but I'm sure it was. I usually talk quite a bit about order flow during live streams, and we will cover order flow today as well. So we can see this is the CVD line, this is price, this is also CVD. But we have had, since this initial rejection from the high, aggressive selling coming in this range. We did have a very high volume, high negative delta wick here, 118 million volume in a 5-minute candle, 37 million negative delta. Bunch of longs getting stopped out, not surprising on that big wick. So nice setup to try to look for longs here on that liquidity grab. But order flow would suggest to me locally that we push higher through these highs, but I'm still willing to take this short if I get a clean trigger. And if I get stopped out, this long will carry. But here, just a couple things we can note. This price kind of grinds up here, and this is the 5-minute chart, by the way. Each one of these is a candle. So it's we've had some pretty aggressive selling into this rally. 2.7 negative delta, 6.2 million negative delta, 2.1. Some longs opening here, but then 9.8 million negative delta. Big decrease in open interest. So we've been seeing aggressive selling. Some aggressive buying, like here we have at the highs we have several $1 million of longs, 4.6 million positive delta. But again, another negative 6.4 million delta at the lows here. So people kind of getting chopped up, selling aggressively into these low time frame pullbacks, and some signs of absorption pushing price higher. Coinalyze, you can see your CVD and your open interest. You can't see the like I don't think they have footprint charts like this, but it's the same data. It's just portrayed differently. It depends on the setup, what a TP could look like. It also depends, like sometimes it can make sense just to hedge a position instead of TPing. So let me give an example of that. So let's say, for example, you're quite bullish, you've got a good long position like this, and you really don't want to take profits, but you also don't want to round trip your trade. So you might say, well, I'm just going to hedge out my position on a rejection here. So I basically captured the profits of this whole move up. And if we reject, maybe close my hedge and profits, sort of locking in the difference here, or carry it if we break down. So you can use hedges instead of profit taking. But usually, you know, standard kind of profit taking, 35%, 50%. It could be 75%. You could carry this to the highs of the range. Let's say your setup was just to trade it as a range. You could carry 75%, have limit selling orders up here, and carry 25% in case of a breakout. But for example, I would not be taking profits aggressively on this long if I get it. This is a high time frame trade. I'm willing to carry my size from there. If I get a valid trigger, a nice reaction, I can always take shorts in different setups as separate setups on separate time frames. But I wouldn't enter here and then take profit here. This is a setup that is high time frame, and I'd be happy to carry it longer or higher with full size. But this setup is a little harder to justify trying to carry this to 50K, in my view. But if you want to do it, you could try it. You could bring your stop to entry. You could round trip your profits if you're into that. Trying a head short is always reasonable too. Sol is coming up and testing the highs of its range. We've put in basically a perfect double top here. I think it's likely we run these highs, and I wouldn't actually be surprised to see us break out. I would consider shorting something like this, but you'd almost have to consider taking profits on a retest here if there's a reaction. But the next level I'm looking at is just coming and retesting these lows at the 50% fib. It's not really a fib, but the 50% retracement from this high. Looking at this as a range around $75, $76. And if we claim that, well, that looks quite bullish. So maybe we're heading to $140. But I think that's the next significant structural resistance if we break out here locally. We kind of had some resistance across here with our 382 fib, which we ran through those highs, we rejected. But I would say ETH looks more or Sol looks more bullish here than not, and wouldn't be surprised to see a push up here. But if I get a tight invalidation set up, even can take profits on this locally, sweeping these highs. Something like this is probably still 4 or 5R. And maybe we see continuation, but maybe TP up like that. Someone's asking why I wouldn't be surprised to see Sol break out. Because anything here, let me just hide this. Any rejection here, you're basically looking at some sort of, fake out of a breakout, which we have not faked out yet. And maybe getting accepted back under this resistance. Then you could expect some kind of rejection. But this is just very bullish. Price is more or less just going straight up, claiming every single previous resistance as support. And there's no reason to think it's the most likely scenario that we just randomly reject here for a major retracement. It might get a minor retracement, maybe a retest of these levels. But the more likely scenario is probably to come up and test this level. And could offer a decent rejection from there. But if we claim that, it's hard to imagine that we aren't going to start making our way up into this $140 region as the next key high time frame level. But there's no structural resistance here. But we all know price can chop around and get rangy before a breakout, so that might happen. Someone's saying how to get long on Sol if price can go so high. Well, there's lots of bullish charts. Everything can go high if we break out. But I actually did have a long on Sol. It just barely got stopped out. The idea as we were ranging here was to come in and take these lows and carry it through into the highs of the range. But probably some people who traded this a little differently than me maybe are still in that trade. But that would have been a nice setup. I mean, you can get long anywhere. I mean, you could say, I think we're going to break out. I can structure my trade, just use risk management. Your size is going to be pretty small. You could say, I don't think we're going to retrace. I mean, it's not even what you think is going to happen. It's just, you want to trade a breakout. This is a 4-hour setup. You could wait for the breakout. Trade price under this consolidation. Trade it as a breakout. As long as the technical targets make sense and your risk is managed and your invalidation is reasonable, because obviously if you take a trade like this, you want to see price break out. You might allow some room for some volatility, but you'd start being suspicious if this is a breakout, if this starts happening. I think, one thing that can kind of happen is, let's just use the example of, let's say I'm trading this setup. Let's just pretend I didn't get stopped out in this example. So I'm trading this setup. I've taken this long. And maybe I've TP1, but I'm like, hey, I'm willing to hold some of this to $140 here if we break out. Maybe I'm even talking about this idea here. People watching the video might say, oh, how do I get long? It's like, well, you can get long however you want. I mean, just use risk management. I think what people really want to ask is, or what it can seem like people are saying is, if I didn't have any plan, I wasn't watching this chart, You know, because like for example, I can go back and show these setups. Some of them I missed, uh, but I've had these on my chart for days and days and days and days. I'm waiting to trade them. This is one I just slightly got front run on. So yeah, I took an XRP long ETH and Bitcoin last night, but this was another setup. And for some reason, I probably would have taken this. I think I had my alert set too low. The idea was sweeping this wick, forming a range here, whatever. But the idea is I planned that trade from up here, and I'm executing it quickly. So I think what people might be asking is, how can I get into a long position at the bottom, you know, with really tight invalidation? It's like into this setup basically, but you can't. So you have to take a different setup. If you're insistent in getting long, there, you can look to trade breakouts. You can look to trade minor retracements, wide stops, low risk. You know, it's unlikely that you're gonna, like, there's a higher likelihood that a position like this holds after a sweep and a reclaim than taking really tight stop positions anywhere. But anyways, there's lots of reasonable ways to get into a trade. Just use risk management. If it doesn't work, you get stopped out. But typically, just getting into a position, long or short, because you feel like you've missed the move, or you're going to miss the move, or you didn't get a good entry, sometimes that works out. But over the long haul, you want to be preparing all of your trades. And planning ahead and executing efficiently. If you're always just, you never have a plan, you never have a trade set up, you're never prepared, and you're just always chasing price, it's not going to end well. And I'm not saying price will go to $140, by the way. I'm just noting structural resistance here. There's really nothing here if we break out until here, and if we claim that, there's really nothing until $140. Even, and that said, we could reject anywhere. But anyways, price likes to move through areas of the chart with no resistance quickly, typically. But it also likes to fake people out. I'm sure there's a lot of people looking to trade breakouts here, can have this happen, run the lows again, and then do that. I'm interested to see if we get any kind of volatility into the New York Open. It hasn't been as interesting the last couple weeks. The open is in 3 minutes. Volume has been very low coming into this open on Bitcoin. You know, in these 5-minute candles, 1.2 million volume, 300K delta, 2.4, 1.1, 1.1, 660K. This is very low delta or volume. give me a minute here. I'll take a quick look at Doge. Someone requested that in chat. So Doge is running in this is the 4-hour chart. There's this big parallel channel here. We impulse and hit the highs of it. But we only did on Bybit. And unfortunately, because I've had this on my chart since the lows, this channel. But we front ran my alert. I had my alert, which is this yellow line, set on the Binance chart, which runs a little different. The wicks are different. But yeah, my thoughts on Doge is for a higher time frame setup, which did get front run the other night with this big wick. So I'd like to just come and test all these lows. Look for a tight invalidation long, trade it up back through these highs. As far as locally, well, I'm not really that interested in trading anything locally. We had this big high volume liquidity sweep. Almost looks like there's a trend line here that probably wants to break, depending on how it's drawn. We're on touch number 5. Certainly going to be a lot of people watching it. Maybe like assuming Bitcoin gets another impulse and ETH and everything else, which we don't know will happen, maybe another run through these highs can make sense. Run the liquidity above that trend line. I've got to clean up this chart a little bit. Just want to mark out the daily highs here. Of course, price can hold trend lines. It's just on the 5th touch. I wouldn't be so interested in shorting that, especially with these pivot highs right above us. But if you wanted to, you know, you could invalidation above the highs. But maybe running these highs can make a lot of sense. I think the 786 was right above this daily candle, right below it. Could also try to catch a break of the trend line. But the two major levels I'd like to trade around, personally, and go back to the Bybit chart. Is coming and taking these highs. That'd be an interesting target for long setups. Coming and taking these lows. And just some noticing. I don't know how I never noticed this before. Oh, that's the spot pair. Okay. Well, that would do it. Well, yeah, maybe the spot, I mean, even having spot coming and filling these wicks as well could be interesting. I actually did get the setup here if I'd been setting my alerts on the right chart. Yeah, so that would have been a clean setup, coming and sweeping these lows. But anyways, coming and filling this wick, I'd be interested in that. Coming and taking these highs, interested in that. I'm not really interested in scalping anything here. But that doesn't mean there's not scalps. It's just I can only trade so many things, chart so many things. Let me move this alert up a little bit. All right, well, we're 5 minutes into the open. I'll take a couple alt requests. So I'll look at EGLD. And I pulled it up. Look at Bitcoin order flow on the other screen. This is the wrong chart. Current rejection is right from, this is the daily chart on EGLD, right from our major golden pocket. Similar to where Sol rejected from, XRP. Came up and took these daily highs, wicked through them. Just curious if this ran to the 382. Or ran a little deeper. Also just an absolutely perfect parallel channel there. This is one of my favorite setups. So before this high would have come in, you run your trend angle on the parallel channel. You anchor it to the highs. And so you have this channel before the move, like this. And then a really nice confluence is just when the major fibs, like the 618, align perfectly with the channel. But that is gone. Sweeping some local highs. Looks kind of bullish, but yeah, I don't know. Probably my bias is we'll see a flush on Bitcoin at some point lower, which will probably nuke a bunch of alts. Come and take these impulse lows, but that might not happen. It's currently just at resistance. Personally, I wouldn't be interested in longing there. But if we did come and get a major retracement, even taking these lows could be considered. Even wait for some more bullish structure to form. Maybe just target up into the highs of the range. Obviously, if Bitcoin runs to 50K, then lots of alts are going to show a lot of strength. I'm not saying that will happen, but if. Let's do it on the Doge. All right, we'll take a quick look at FTM while we're hanging out here. This was a little bit of an annoying front run. I had this idea from much higher for like months and months and months of FTM coming in running this low, but I had an alert set there. We didn't get it. The idea was coming in and then on a lower time frame coming in, filling this wick, retesting this low, and then I would be looking for a nice swing long setup on FTM. But obviously we front ran that. But I have so many charts, and I'm not sitting there trying to make sure I get this long or that short. If I get an alert and I get a setup, I'll take the trade. That trade had been planned out for months and just got a slight front run. So, is what it is. But my thoughts on the FTM chart, obviously, like many charts, we've taken some high time frame structure and potentially flipping it to resistance here. Just these equal highs on the daily chart. We swept them, rejected, flipping them as resistance currently. I wouldn't want to long into that resistance. Right at the 786. What I would be potentially interested in longing could be pretty ambitious though. Coming, taking these lows. And again, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I'll tell you if it does happen, I'll be ready. I think if Bitcoin does get a flush down into this 32K level to retest these old highs like I mentioned, it's going to be the case, most likely, that a lot of alts just absolutely nuke. Lots of people longing alts. It's apparently alt season. So just from a liquidity standpoint, if this happens on Bitcoin, I think a lot of alts are going to test major retracement support. I'd like to lock in some longs then. Be a little more aggressive about my entries and optimistic about my targets. But until then, it's all just local structure, unless you have some really particular reason to be super bullish on a particular project. But a flush will probably come at some point. I'm still willing to take the lower time frame setups. Like I took this ETH long, I had that link long planned. But yeah, I think a lot of these alts are probably going to flush. It's probably a good idea to have some charts and levels prepared and marked out in the case that does happen. Volume very low like I said on Bitcoin, nothing too interesting happening here as of now. Nothing interesting happening in order flow. I think an interesting scalp long on Bitcoin or lower time frame setup would just be to come and retest these levels. Still with the same target. So if that happens, could be interesting. And some alts might, like that link setup might come if Bitcoin does something like that. Well, I don't know if there's much sense in prolonging this live stream. I was kind of hoping that we would see, because as I prepared to and announced the live stream, we were seeing this. I was kind of hoping we'd see this into the open. Maybe be live around trading that level, if there's a trade trigger at all. But there hasn't been, so I'm just not a big fan of, personally, just sitting in front of the charts and staring at nothing happening. Better just have your plans. Your levels either get hit or not. Your alerts either go off or they don't. The order flow platform I was using is called Exo Charts. But yeah, nothing too interesting happening here. Price chopping around. I mean, these horizontal levels are important, undoubtedly. Just structurally, for price to be claiming them. Maybe we come down and retest this trend line, hold it. Personally, I'm taking my risk out of these longs. I don't think there's any reason at this point. I can always re-enter if, say, we come and run these lows and get a reaction. I don't think there's any sense in running all this risk at this point in this ETH trade from the initial entry. Someone's asking, what do I like to do to keep my mind off the charts? I mean, I'm not really trying to keep my mind off the charts. I really just don't enjoy sitting and staring at the charts when there's no, like, say I've done my analysis, I know the trades I want to take, I have short setups, I have long setups, I have alerts set. To some extent, I don't really care what price is doing in between those setups. Like, I don't need to know every 5-minute candles activity if I've taken a long or I'm planning on a short. I just want to know when price is approaching the target I'm interested in trading, key levels, and whatever happens in between doesn't really matter. But you have to spend time on the charts to plan out your trades, right? And then when price is approaching the levels of interest, to execute your trades if you get a valid trigger. But I think, what the pitfall people fall into is they're just sitting staring at the charts and they just start trading. They don't have a plan. They're opening and closing trades constantly with every 5-minute candle up and down. They're not trading key levels. They don't really have invalidation. They're just, I'm long. Oh no, I'm closing my long. Actually, I'm long again. I'm closing it. Oh, I should have stayed in it. I'll just go short. Oh, I should have stayed in my long. I'm long again. Actually, I'll close it and go short. And they're just staring at a chart, staring at 5-minute candles with no plan. And just, for me, my longs from down here, I don't really care what happens here. It's not to say I couldn't sit here and try to scalp like local resistance, local support, but I'm not going to. So I'm interested to see if price runs up to these highs, if I have a setup. I'm interested to know that if price comes down and runs into my entries. So other than that, just hanging out. Go do whatever. You have your alerts set. They show up on your phone. For example, I'll probably go get some dinner relatively soon. And maybe have to leave the restaurant if we get a big pump. Anyways, I hope this was enjoyable. There was nothing too exciting going on here. There's legitimately nothing happening on Bitcoin. Like volume is just completely dead. So there's some chance if something really exciting happens over the next 30 minutes or an hour or something like that, maybe I'll come back live. Frankly, probably not. But I'll certainly be giving my thoughts in the Discord. And I think I already shared my charts here on Bitcoin on Twitter. All right, guys. Thanks. Sorry nothing too crazy happened here. Currently just waiting for higher on Bitcoin. Whether we get it or not, we'll see. Did have that big liquidity grab. So we'll